The urgency is there. It always has been there. What we're seeing now is we're on the cusp of significant change if we don't action out new steps in moving towards better improving drinking water operations and responsibly managed wastewater systems.
The biggest thing for us is, it's urgent. And on that note, what are the stats? How do we know it's urgent? Looking at it on a sort of a bigger perspective, we can see some earlier stuff that was done in terms of polls from 2005 and whatnot. Maybe it's time we research that a bit more and look at where we might have not just that particular one, but in general, what are our stats? What should we be focusing on? And doing more of that to get a better handle on how urgent it actually is.
We kind of said reasonably urgent. We feel that the recent economic downturn kind of coupled with the general state of wages that operators get paid has created a kind of an incentive for people to actually stay on a little bit longer in their jobs than they thought they were going to have to in 2005. We don't consider that necessarily a positive thing, but it does actually perhaps reduce the urgency of the sort of demographic bubble that we're seeing. But we do recognize that this demographic bubble is coming for sure.
So our group talked about how urgent it was, and if you look at the mining and the forestry industries, they're having the same problem that we're having. So this is not new, and the wider the problem is, the more important it really is.
The short answer to the first question, how urgent, very. Especially for small town operators. They're, as we saw it, maybe the most vulnerable of all of the groups here. A couple of things we talked about and discussed was how do we get these people enough experience so that they can get certified? The time to get certified. Those are all difficult things that are going to end up being urgent problems in the future.
We definitely had one agreement here, was that it's more urgent in smaller centers, and that's been echoed through all the groups. And a lot of that in the smaller centers, maybe that they don't have anyone in line to replace the one or two operators, and for that matter, wanting to be in line for a smaller center because the money isn't there, the wages aren't there, the logistics, the housing, which was talked about as well. It's just it doesn't make sense for them to do that.
As far as the urgency goes, same with everybody else, with the smaller communities seems to have more of an urgency with the operators and retaining and maintaining their operators. Some of the critical issues with them are the base education levels in the smaller communities. Grade 7 and 8 is the best you can get, and that it's a big issue with them. And having the right attitude to run a wastewater plant. It's not there for the smaller communities, or bringing people that have the right attitude to those smaller communities is a lot more difficult. So for smaller communities, it's very urgent.
The trends, more movement, has been mentioned already, wage competition, and one of the big things we talked about was the need for more retention efforts on the part of employers and others.
Demand for this type of profession, as well as the systems themselves, they're going to increase and they're going to become more complex.
Major trends and issues were pretty well identified this morning: aging workforce, information management, rural retention, and the regionalization of systems. That's going to be an issue.
The operator is a jack of all trades as opposed to being a specific trade, and that has some benefits and it has some disadvantages. In our table, we looked at kids now tend to want to focus on one thing, and the jack of all trades guy is starting to disappear. And with that, Alberta Advanced Education is moving to attract people to trades. The industries are starting to move that direction. Is that something that we need to look at?
As far as some trends go, we looked at just careers in general and how the new workforce, again, we talked about this, how what are their values, how they communicate, what do they see as career needs or wants. We looked at some opportunities to engage maybe more women in the workforce. Water and wastewater industry is heavy on the male side, and we've seen a little bit more of women breaking through into this industry, but maybe we can tap into that resource a bit more. Retirees, for example, wanting to come back and maybe look at succession planning with that, and how do we tap into those resources as an option?
One of the trends that we did identify is that people are having difficulty retiring because of the economic situation right now, and because of the amount of money they've been paid all along. But we also did identify that as people are approaching retirement age, some of them are finding that they actually want to continue to work, at least on a part-time or contract kind of basis.
As far as a major trend goes, the training can be done anywhere. Training programs can be developed anywhere as long as there is some financial supports for it. You need, for this kind of training, you need financial support for instructors, not only instructors, you need for instruments, for laboratory, and etc. So it takes a lot to develop training program, but it can be done anywhere.
Some of the major trends that we're seeing is a need to redevelop how educational institutions and other training opportunities take in historic or traditional learning methodologies with that of new technologies. That's one of the new trends that we're going to be facing on the horizon.
For some people, as things become more complex, how involved you want to be. Technology is sort of this double-edged sword where, there's a lot of benefits to technology, but there's training involved with taking on new technology, and the smaller centers don't have that capability always.
But we did see that as a major trend, continuing trend, smaller communities having difficulty with retention and attraction.
Number two, the issues, a lot of issues there. One of the big ones, especially for small communities again, was cost. How do you pay for these things? Time, replacement while the individual is gone to training as well. Legal service requirements, again, that falls into things like liability.
Housing was something we talked about too, and that was brought up as well. Maybe a short-term attraction to a smaller community to provide some housing for an operator, but maybe turns into a long-term attraction program because that person gets involved in the community and actually enjoys what they're doing and wants to stick around in that community.
One of the other things we come up with is the private sector tends to solve problems by fixing it with money. And municipalities try that, but there's a budget limit and it stops right there. And that tends to cascade into future problems. Municipalities are they are politicians, and they tend to have a 3 to 5 year vision, and some of that maybe has to be looked at.
We discussed a fair amount the sort of state of the wages versus the cost of living that operators are having. Clearly there's no really simple solution to that. But towards the end of our time, we were talking about the cost, average monthly cost of water in your house is maybe $50-$60 a month. If you compare that to smoking, which is a $10 a day hit, or if you compare that to cable, which is a $3 a day hit, our whole society is willing to spend a lot of money on luxuries, essentially, and not willing to spend a lot of money on things that are like water and health that are essential. And we need to rethink that, and we need to get our mayors and our councils and our CAOs and our premiers rethinking that, and we need to get the public rethinking that. That's not a small or easy project.
Education on a global sense that what is the true cost, what is the true value of water, and when everybody turns on the taps, do they realize what it takes to get that water there and what the true value of that water is, not only from a health perspective, but I think it was a TSAC presentation, a fire hydrant. We have a fire, turning that fire hydrant on and having water come out of it means somebody treated that water, somebody's pumped that water, somebody's operated that hydrant to make sure it was ready to go when the fire happens. You talk to somebody about that, say for instance, for Slave Lake, I mean, it speaks for itself. So the value there is huge, and I'm not sure everybody understands that. So it's a matter of educating people about what that value is.
There's no one solution that's going to solve everything, I know there was some talk about regionalization, and there's certainly an upside to that, but there's also downsides to that. You know, the longer the pipe is, the worse the product is at the end, as one of the guys around our table said. And you need to, a regional system with a long pipe needs to have people along that pipe who are able to maintain the distribution and collection systems. So just regionalizing systems doesn't make the problem go away.
And one thing we were wondering, what exactly are the numbers? How do we keep a grip on that? And maybe one way to do that is every 3 years the operator certification renewal stuff goes out. Why don't we just include a piece of paper in that with a little bit of how long are you planning on staying, some job satisfaction, something like that, that will give us an idea of how operators are happy with their job. And I suppose that would be somewhat similar to, for those of us in the trade, a COD test and a BOD test, where a COD test gives us a result on the wastewater 3 hours later, and the BOD test gives us it 5 days later.
We like the session like this here, and the results out of there has to be translated back to the municipalities, the bosses. And so it's important to get that message back to the bosses of the operators.
This workshop is one of the opportunities, and hopefully this is the first of many, and I'm not sure what kind of schedule it could be on, but it should be repeated. Some new technologies, for sure, is an opportunity, the iPads and the information that happens there. And that definitely lines up with younger workers and their ability to converse with a computer and make things happen without even being feet in the plant.
We talked a little bit about flexibility within the organization, providing opportunities for the individuals in the workforce and those coming into the workforce. One of the things that was mentioned by my colleague to the right here was trying not to just move the problem elsewhere. So you're not robbing from one place, moving it solves your problem, but it might cause an even bigger problem elsewhere.
So we went into a fair discussion of trying to identify people in the smaller communities who are have other reasons why they want to stay in that community, family reasons or family connections. So so that's one of the things that we were looking at to try and help those smaller communities out.
Opportunities. Instead of competing with the herd, maybe we should step back and get the second career guys. Let the northern guys pay them the money, and then we'll give them a lifestyle when they're 40 and burned out. So,
Focusing on developing training places more throughout the province at smaller communities and spending that money and having some financial support.
Another opportunity, of course, is knowledge transfer, because we can do that now before those people leave. The colleges and universities that are here in this room, that's an opportunity, and we probably need to seize some of that, make use of them.
As people are approaching retirement age, some of them are finding that they actually want to continue to work, at least on a part-time or contract kind of basis. And so that is definitely an area that, or a group of people that we can use to help us out with this issue. But again, on a short-term or medium-term kind of situation, because you know, we can't count on these people 20 or 30 years down the line, right?
The circuit riders, we talked about that, having a really good program. They're going into small systems where there's one operator, but the person working shoulder to shoulder with them also knows that same information. So if that operator leaves, you can slide right in there and continue that. In a bigger community, it's not such an issue. It is still an issue, but there are other operators in the plant that can help you with different things. So that's going to be somewhat helpful.
Some of the challenges on the horizon will be still facing the competition of other sectors, namely the industrial sector in acquiring new staff.
Some challenges that we identified for capturing evolving knowledge, what the operators are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and how we can share that information with other operators and future operators, and then evaluating the processes of how we're doing that.
Challenges on the horizon. I won't add to or repeat the ones that were already mentioned, but politics was mentioned as a big one. Need to train administrators, not just on what operators do, but their regulatory requirements, what they are required to do, as opposed to what they think they should do.
As far as risks of staying the course, like I said earlier, we can see the problems coming down the pipe. Maybe they're not coming quite as fast as we thought they were, but they are coming. And I think we know that the risks of ignoring these problems coming are going to result in a lack of service, and they're going to result in health concerns.
On the major risks, well, obviously a huge risk there is not meeting regulatory requirements, the effect to the entire community, and again we're talking about health and environment and all the rest of it, legal liability, and here again we have a lack of awareness, especially some of the administrators in smaller communities. And the bottom line here that we came up with was the budget, just the ability to do what is needed. And there's only so much money to go around. How do we make the best use of it?
If we stay the course of where the typical day-to-day training opportunities and risks that operators face with having limited resources, whether it be for the municipalities, is that there can be a catastrophic event. It's happened down east that many of you are familiar with, and it's not a matter of if, it's when it can happen in Alberta.
And the major risk, obviously, is bad quality water that can affect people's health and people's, I guess, long-term or short-term health. Also, the receiving environment in a particular area. And both of these can have a very major effect on the local economy and local growth. We all know about Walkerton across the country, and they have a bad sickness system going already towards them. And how many people are actually going to move to that area and their local community is growing? I'm not sure, but if something else like that happens, or if an area is known for not having the similar fishing or that type of thing, the local community and growth is going to get affected, which a lot of these areas are not informed of right now or not thinking. So,
what happens if we don't do it? But I think we can all see what's going to happen, and it boils down to boiling the water.